it was not an accident that he, caused me to be born in America into a Cuban American home. And so I had to deal with that resentment.
Welcome to this conversation Caleb and I had with Caitlin Aumack. We talked about her cultural heritage. Caitlin is Cuban American and as a young child did not like her Cuban side because she felt different from her friends. She learned to embrace her cultural identity. She even had to work through some resentment she had towards the American side as she engaged with different cultures. Caitlin is currently pursuing studies in midwifery and wants to invest in the lives of young women. Caleb Bannister is back as my co-host on We Talk Story. Enjoy his vibrance and insightful observations and comments in this episode. So Caitlin, you basically grew up in two worlds, your mom's Cuban family and your dad's white American family. So how did that play out for you in your daily life?
Yeah, so growing up in a Cuban American family, I would say, I always heard like my mom and my abuela, which means grandma, speaking Spanish. And the thing about growing up is I never actually learned Spanish. So there's somewhat of a disconnect in regards to just like understanding the culture and understanding the language even, which I believe is a huge part of culture in general. But one thing that I do remember growing up was that, and where I saw really the two merge together, would be around Christmas time. And we have this tradition, a Cuban tradition called Noche Buena, which is a basically a holiday, a feast that we put together on Christmas Eve. And we roast the pig. And I remember like growing up, we would, my dad and my grandpa, my Cuban grandpa, would come home with like a slaughtered pig and we would like marinate it in the kitchen. And it was just like an open pig just chilling in our kitchen, and it's like, so like my friends would be like, what in the world, like what, like it was so abnormal. But being that it was such a tradition that we carry as Cubans, it was normal for me. And that was really where I saw the two merge together, as well as just even hearing different parts and bits of stories from my abuela, my grandma, and her story of being raised in Cuba and leaving Cuba and all of those types of things.
Yeah, that's great. I remember you talking about your Christmas. I know it's one of your favorite memories, eh?
Yeah, it is. I love it.
So Caleb, you are part of our conversation today.
What's up, family?
Did you sort of lean into one part of your culture at one stage in your life, or did you have to rediscover it in a way in another time in your life? The two parts of it.
Yeah, so growing up, like I would say growing up in a Cuban American home, I lean more towards the American mindset and the culture, just because I think that growing up, like that's all I really knew. It was like I knew that part of my family was Cuban, but a lot of what they came from, like they even embrace the Cuban because they fled a communist country, and they still like identify. But so growing up, it was more encouraged, I would say, and and even growing up in a family where, like I said, they came from like my mom and my grandma and my auntie and my uncle, like they grew up not having anything. So I remember being encouraged, when I was younger. It's like always pursue an education, like always pursue a career because you have the opportunity here. Um, and so I carried that with me, as far as like being reminded of really the blessing that I have of growing up in America and having opportunity to have education, to pursue a career. But I remember when I joined missions, like that was something I really had to trust God for. Was that like my mom and they're believers, like they love God, they trust God, but I had to trust that God would show them the value as well in pursuing missions. And so when I joined Island Breeze, it kind of like this identity and this like cultural background of being Cuban American really kind of came more to life for me in a way. Just it sparked a curiosity, I would say, of
Mm,
just like, what do I carry? As what are my strengths? What are
Mm.
like the foundational principles and strengths that as Cuban people, like that we carry as a people, and what do I now carry, because that is also part of my DNA.
Well, if I can say, so Caitlin, you grew up in Florida, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so because isn't Florida like there's a huge population of Cubans, and so
Yeah.
what I'm curious about is growing up like in high school and junior high, like was it that thing of a pressure of being more Latina? Was there kind of that sense of like,
Mm,
yo, these are your roots, this is who you gotta be, or did you still kind of lean more, as you say, to, for lack of a better word, more of the white culture, if that makes sense?
mm. Well, I remember, like, growing up, actually, I do remember when I was a little girl, um, like, I remember feeling very different because the school that I had went to, a lot of the girls there were pale skin,
Mm.
light eyes, blonde hair, and here was Caitlin, like, very tan, dark
Come on now.
complexion, dark hair, like, totally the opposite.
Hmm.
And I think from what I remember my mom telling me, like, I remember going to my mom and saying, like, I don't want to look this way. Like, I want to
Wow.
look like
mm,
the other girls, I want to fit in. I want to look like them. And I
Mm.
think my mom, she told me this one time. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's correct, but she had said, like, I had told her that I don't want to be Cuban anymore. She looked at me, she's like, "Well, you better get over it because your mom is Cuban."
And
So
I know your mom, and I know your mom. I can see her say that with her hand in the air, with a right,
oh,
smack
yeah.
of love. She's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
She's
yeah.
amazing.
And it was awesome because I see that in me now, like the passion,
Hmm.
that like a lot of the time, like they'll joke around and say, like, if you hear two Cubans talking, it might sound like they're arguing, but they're not. They're just passionately talking.
Mm.
And I've seen that, how I've also kind of carried that same type of passion, in several ways. So
True.
yeah, so growing up, I would say, there was, that my it wasn't a pressure to be Cuban. It was really like understanding that, oh, I look different, like,
Hmm.
and but it wasn't it started out negative, but I think as I grew up, like, I didn't really have so much of an understanding as I do now.
Yeah, so Caitlin, I know from a South African point of view, Cuba is actually a nation that I've been curious about, and
Mm.
that's because of my South African history. But yeah, do you mind sharing a little bit about your mom's story about how she came to America, or she and her parents,
Yeah.
and maybe a little bit about their experiences in the beginning,
Mm.
that transition from one nation to a new nation,
Mm.
because I think there's many people, even like refugees and people like that around the world, that have to deal with those kind of things into even today.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to honor my mom, obviously, in sharing her story because it's not my story. So she gave me
Mm.
permission to share it. And so, yeah, so basically, what had happened was in Cuba, I believe this. I'm gonna get the dates wrong, so I'm not even gonna try. but
Yeah.
but basically in Cuba, like you had some Cubans that would flee the nation on rafts and boats, as I'm sure people have seen in articles and news. But for my mom and her family, there was something called freedom flights out of
Mm,
Cuba, where basically the people of Cuba would be on a waiting list, and at any moment, the government could come to their house and say, "You need to leave right now," and they would get on a plane and leave the country. Like it wasn't a heads up and or
Wow.
anything like that. And so the story goes that one day, basically, it was my mom, and which I believe she was around 7 or 8 around that time. And she had an older brother and her younger sister and my grandma and her mom. And the government one day just pounds on the door and says, "You need to get out right now." And all they
wow.
could take really was the clothes that were on their back and
Wow.
a couple of dresses. I think my mom told me, like, my grandma, her mom had, quickly grabbed a couple of dresses, and they got on a plane and
Oh my
came
goodness.
flew into Miami, Florida. And my mom says she still remembers to this day the feeling of when she stepped off the plane and the wind just kind of blew up under her dress, and this little girl, like she's like
Oh,
this new world of
yeah.
a new country. But yeah, my grandma made the decision. She was actually a single mother, and
Wow.
she had made the decision to flee and to leave Cuba, where she left behind her mom and her dad, which she was very close to,
Mm,
her
Yeah.
sister, and everything she ever knew. She left to pursue an opportunity for herself and also for her children.
wow.
And so, yeah, I have so much respect for my grandma, my abuela, my
Mm.
mom,
Wow.
just in the way that she made that hard decision to
Yeah.
flee with her children in mind and raising children as a single mom in a brand new country.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a rich legacy. Like,
Mm.
Yeah.
that is actually ridiculous. Honestly, I and it get to me when I hear that story, Caitlin, it gives me perspective of like, why do we whine about the things that we whine about?
Mm.
I mean, as 20-year-olds, where we have almost everything in this world that we need that can be given to us, and yet, we find a way to complain about something, and yet your abuela made the decision of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's just such perspective.
Yeah.
Ah, it's
No.
amazing.
It's so true. And like I said, like it wasn't easy,
Mm,
and my heart, like even sharing this, like it really goes out to like you said, Luis, those refugee families that leave.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's like it's not an easy decision to leave something that's all you've known,
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
no guarantee. There's no
and there
guarantee
Yep.
of anything.
yeah.
Yes.
And my abuela,
Yeah.
she had to start from the ground up. She barely spoke English,
Yeah.
and so she was going to nursing school, and she would study the textbook and look at the dictionary at the
Wow.
same time. And it wasn't
Wow.
easy, like it wasn't an easy childhood, because since my abuela was trying to make a living and to provide for her family, like
Yeah.
for her children, like a lot of the time my mom and her siblings would just have to stay alone at home as these little kids, and all throughout it they didn't know God, and my
Yeah.
mom didn't know God until she was in her late 20s. And
Mm.
she said, like, it was, she looks back and is like, how, like, it was only God that brought me through all of
Yeah.
that.
Have you ever wondered why your cultural identity is so important? Well, we have a free resource. In this free resource, it will give you 2 good reasons on why cultural identity should be trendy. You will also gain a clarity and confidence in who you are. Lastly, you will know exactly when it is your time to shine. Follow the My Time to Shine link in the show notes.
Caitlin, you talked about earlier about the gifts that you got from your different sides.
Mm,
Do you can you say what they are, or are they clearer for you? Because I think um, in your journey with Island Breeze that you've been with us, me and Caleb,
mm,
you we really explore the whole thing about cultural identity, and it
yeah.
must have become much more defined for you in the last while, even through doing schools like
Mm.
Principles of Redeeming Culture. Yeah, do you have some things that you'd like to share about that and your personal journey as well with that?
Yeah. You know, like I said, when I was with Island Breeze, and especially I think doing the Principles of Redeeming Culture school, it really sparked a curiosity of, what are foundational principles and characteristics that are really a fingerprint of God in this culture and in this people group. And as I reflected on my family, and also just, looking at the Cuban people, I see so much joy, I see so much joy, despite their circumstances, like
Mm,
I really see them as a people of celebration, like you look at videos of people in Cuba and they're playing music, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's very familial, it's like, the family unit, like it's strong, um and I would say that, they're also very hardworking people. Like,
mm,
you know, I mean, even though people go to Cuba on vacation nowadays, like the Cuban people don't see any, rarely, I shouldn't say never, because I'm not entirely clear on the situation, but I would say they rarely see like the income from the tourism, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
work
mm,
really hard for what they have,
mm.
they're very hardworking, they're innovative,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and those are some things, I believe I still have a lot more to uncover and to discover
Yeah.
about it.
And even your American side?
Yeah, and for my American side, I mean, I've seen, like I would say, the interesting thing when I went through the Principles of Redeeming Culture school, what really got brought up in my heart, which I didn't know was there, especially I think being in missions, and being surrounded by so many cultures and so many people groups, you tend to like see the value of other cultures more than your own at first, and
Yeah,
so being an American, and I know, like, Americans around the world kind of have a bad name, and I think initially, I had a resentment actually towards my American side, which
Wow.
is majority of my, I mean, not majority, it's half. I grew up in America, so it's
yeah,
like, what, like, why do I have this resentment? But
Mm.
I had this resentment more towards like the individualism that I would see, whereas
yeah,
cultures in the Middle East or in Polynesia, or, they're very much community oriented, whereas in America, it's like just, it's about me, it's,
yeah,
my own thing. And God really had to deal with that in my heart,
Mm-hmm.
because yes, even though I am half Cuban, I'm still very much American, and
yeah,
so I had to stand up for, that cultural identity that God placed me in. It was not an accident that
Yes.
he,
yeah,
caused me to be born in America into a Cuban American home. And so I had
yeah,
to deal with that resentment. And really, I believe, like, God did heal that in me, where I was able to see the strengths of American people and that large part of who I am. And I was also able to see as a believer, as one who follows Jesus Christ, that um, I'm not only, how do you say, I'm not only an American, but when you're grafted into the family of God, that you get to
Yeah.
represent the strengths of every nation because that's the kingdom of God,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say, but as an American, I really see, yeah, the innovation and the leadership. I really see the leadership over America, how, how it leads out in so many different things, some good and some not so good,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
there's definitely, I would say, a calling and an authority that America carries as a nation for leadership.
And if I can say something with that, because I think that a lot of people that may be listening, they have split ethnicities,
Mhm.
and I love that reality, which is we can't disown, yeah, a quarter of this. Like it's literally, as you said, it's who we are. And
Mhm.
I know for me and my upbringing, my skin tells you that I'm black. The way I speak tells you that I'm white. I'm like an Oreo or reverse Oreo. But like
Right.
I have to be the Oreo to the party, meaning I have to be black when I need to be black and white when I need to be white. But knowing that when I'm white, I still honor my black side, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And knowing that, all right, Lord, like if you make me like this, um, as you said, Caitlin, so well and so perfectly, it is not a mistake. And I think for
Yeah.
those that are listening, like there's so many different mixed ethnicities, and that is such a confusion. So many
Mhm.
people try to just no, I shut that part of me off. That's I don't embrace in that
Yeah.
food and that culture. So
Yeah.
no, very well said,
Mm.
Caitlin.
Yeah, and I think
Mhm.
also to say into that too, it's like, you know, um, there can sometimes be shame,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
can
Absolutely.
come with like embracing or looking at like a certain part of your heritage or culture, like DNA, ethnic background, but it really takes so much um courage in a way to look at it and ask yourself like, but what are the strengths? Like what are the strengths that are in this part of who I am, where I'm not just paying
Mm.
attention to the negative aspects of it, but I'm able to actually see like the beauty in it, the
Mm.
gem
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like the value in it. And it brings about like such a beautiful picture, whereas
Mm.
like if you leave one part out, it's not gonna put together the whole mosaic, where
Yeah. So, Caitlin, you've been traveling to many nations, and you've actually been also around in our team in a multicultural environment.
Yay, yay,
Mhm.
yay.
Um, and I'm curious, is there specific people groups that when you're with them, that you feel more arrive and more yourself and more drawn out? Or is it
Mhm.
not something that you really experience?
I don't know if I would say there is like a particular. I would just say like it was really like the individual, like some people like would bring out a more like deeper, like more like thought-provoking like side to me, like others were more like, who cares? Let's just laugh and have fun, And not to say like those people are not also thought provoking, but it was at different
Yeah, I understand.
times, and then you would have like the South Africans that's like, you know what? I never thought about
Mm.
moving like that, but let me try
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We could stay on that, but we got to keep going. I'm just like,
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun, I will say. Like it was so much fun. And it wasn't always like it was fun, but also there was times where it's like you really had to humble yourself. Like I really had to humble
Yeah.
myself and say like, I don't understand, I don't know, but I'm just gonna try to learn. And basically, I'm gonna like really just have eyes to understand and to see, what is being represented and what I can learn from
Mhm.
this.
Something, Caitlin, that we had is, and Luis, Rudy and Alepa,
Mm,
phenomenal people,
yeah.
and all of us, we've come to the team knowing to some extent on how to serve. But then when you meet Rudy, it's just
Mm.
it takes it to another level. And I
Oh
remember there'd be times we would finish an event at 11,
yeah.
and
Right.
all of us are like ready to get in the van and go, but we also
Mhm.
know deep down he's gonna say it's his heart,
Yeah.
and we'll be leaving at 3 a.m. because everyone else has left, but we're gonna be there cleaning. And
Yeah.
I just remember that that challenged us so much
Oh
because
yeah.
Yeah.
it was just a lot. It was his lifestyle, and
Absolutely.
so I remember specific. There would be times we'd be
Mhm.
so tired, and then Uncle's like, oh, or it would be like this. He'd be like, all right, boys. Oh, when you heard the boys, you just know, like, oh my gosh, like all for the sake of the gospel, but goodness.
Yeah. No, it's so true because I remember those times, like, deep down, I would be so tired. Like, it was
Right?
hard. I'm like, okay, like, yes. But you know what? Like, looking back on those times, like, that is still something that I carry with me,
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
value to serve, and to bless
Yeah.
and to
Mm-hmm.
to be the least,
Yeah.
and to do the job that maybe no one else wants to do. But then you see, like, we would be the ones, and it's not to brag, it's not to boast in ourselves, it's just to be like there, and present, not
Yeah.
only to do our dances, but also to do the things that people don't want to do. And I remember, like, and that goes back to, like, not only like things that I learned from different cultures, but just individuals,
Mm.
that, like, after we would serve and clean up and whatever, you would see the smile on the person's
Mm.
face. You would see the way it has just blessed them and encouraged them to say,
Yeah.
like, wow, it's not just me doing, like, the behind the scenes, but here's like a group of like 10, like, from like 10 different countries
Yeah.
that's like willing to, like, do these things with me, and you find joy in that because
Mm-hmm.
God
Yeah.
knows we would find, something to laugh about or
Yeah.
something to, yeah.
And what would Rudy always say is, are the testimony of Island Breeze is the
Mm,
power of diversity.
yeah.
So when you got people
Mm.
at 12 a.m. who are cleaning up, and you have people who are Korean, Polynesian, black, white, Asian, it's just like,
Yeah.
wait, what? So yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Caitlin, you mentioned something about dancing, so maybe just explain a little bit about what we've been doing since we haven't mentioned it really yet.
Well, Island Breeze, I would say, is a multi-ethnic group of people that really use the expressions from nations and people groups, to really display redemption and to
Mm.
display restoration of a people group, and to show that, these dances or these songs are not taboo, but they can be used to really display beauty, to display
Mm.
strength, to show the world. Like, I remember, the Maori, expression, and doing the haka. It's like, and I remember people coming up and saying, like, I know, like, what a true warrior, or I see what a warrior looks like when you do that, and it
Yeah.
makes me want to, like, discover that in myself. Like, we would do an expression from, I don't know, South Africa and Germany, and even though it's not their own culture, it's like it would provoke something in them to be like,
Yeah.
what do I carry
Yeah.
as a people group,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was an honor, like, to
Yeah.
really, be a part of that.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
learning the dance moves? Like it.
Ooh.
I mean, because here's the thing. Like I know you're Latina, and
Oh,
I don't want to
yeah.
be the one who stereotypes every Latina knows how to move. We do know how to move as Latinos,
Uh-huh.
but I would watch some of you guys doing basics, and hula
Uh-huh.
is not for the faint-hearted.
Oh, no.
How is
Mm-mm.
that? I mean, too.
Yeah. Ooh, let me just tell you right now. It was so humbling. Like, it was so humbling because first of all, like when I joined the team, like growing up, I love to sing and always I love to sing, but when I joined the team, I really had this impression that I was supposed to dance. And it was in a season of life where I just felt like I was coming into another level of coming out of my comfort zone in a way. Like I just really felt
Mm,
the challenge. And I started, and oh my goodness, it was so humbling, because here I am, like, I have no idea what I'm doing, like, and keep in mind, like, I've never danced a day in my life before I had joined Island Breeze, like, no experience whatsoever, but I'm like, "I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm just gonna keep doing it," and I would cry, I would, like, I would just wanna give up, but through it, I discovered how much the spiritual and the physical are tied together.
yeah,
Because as I was learning these dances, in my mind, I would, have these thoughts of like, you look ridiculous. You would, like, you should just give up, like, just this and that, like all these negative thoughts, of just like
yeah,
discouragement and doubt. But I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to keep doing this because ultimately it's God who called me to do this. And
mm,
as I did, like, I mean, it was a process, and I had to learn like discipline. I had to learn like, hey, even if I make a fool of myself, I'm not gonna give up,
yeah,
and I did,
It paid off.
it paid off. Yeah, it paid off, and I discovered a new part of who
mhm,
I am, doing the
mhm,
Samoan and Maori and,
yeah,
Fijian and South African dances, like, I discovered a new part of who I am, through doing that, even though it wasn't my culture, and I was and I remember an uncle,
mm,
Uncle Tuani, he would say, like, in order to represent a culture, you have to become the culture.
Amen.
And that stuck with me. Like,
mm,
and I remember like he would always encourage me and say,
yeah.
like, you can do this, like, and so I was so thankful to also have those voices of encouragement as well as people from the team to say, like, you got this, like, um
Well, I think being around different cultures, miscommunication is bound to happen somewhere and often. Do you have a
Woo! Yeah,
funny
plenty.
story in
Shoot.
that regard?
You know what? In thinking and reflecting on that question, I was trying to think. And I just remember, being in Kansas City, right? And so I'll just preface it with this. Growing up in a Spanish home, you have a certain type of rice.
Uh-oh.
It's like long grain rice. So anyway, I remember being in Kansas City and I was at my leader's house and they're like, "Hey Caitlin, can you make a pot of rice?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." Like I made rice,
And the confidence was out this out, yeah, rocking.
Right. And so here I am, like, because with the long grain rice, you usually put like, a cup of rice, and then with like every cup you give like a cup and a half of
Hmm.
water or whatever.
Hmm.
But little did I know that it was not the same long grain rice.
What the?
It was the Asian.
Because it
Yeah,
is our
so
leaders
they have
is from
Asian
where?
backgrounds, so they love their Asian white rice, which I also love. And so but I put in the wrong water measurements. And so they're like saying like, "Hey, can you make rice?" And like thinking like it's Asian rice and I'm supposed to know how to make Asian rice, but I don't. And so I
What?
go to make it and put in the wrong water measurement and it turns out to be just porridge.
And the thing is this, we are preparing for like a lot of people, you know? It's not just like there's like three or four people there. So
Yeah.
everyone got to embrace on that wonderful awkwardness from
Oh,
Caitlin.
yes. They did not let me forget that moment. Like, that carried on with me even to this
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like, And I just it was so funny. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?"
Well, I think Luis, what's crazy to think when I think of all three of us, but and it's crazy for those that are listening. They may think, man, we make so much money through the places we can go because
Mm,
it's funny. It's like, oh, remember that time in Namibia? Oh, that time in Botswana? Oh, in Korea? Like we say all these different things, but obviously it goes back to the faithfulness
Yeah.
of God. But I remember
mm,
if I could say something bragging about how cool Caitlin is when we were in the Caribbean, and we had the time, we was in Barbados, and we just had this dance off on a boat. And
mm.
I think what so much of
Uh-huh.
Island Breeze, the ministry we've been part of, and understanding our culture, one of the things that it's done for us is it's given us permission to just
Mhm.
break the status quo.
Yeah,
Here we were out in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Caribbean Sea? It's the Caribbean
yeah,
Sea, yeah, or
yep,
ocean?
mhm.
Yeah, big lots
Either
of
way.
water. Yeah, we there, and and we're on the boat, and we were listening. They had like surround sound on the boat, and kind of one thing led to the next, where we were listening to
Mhm.
songs, and then it just turned out to this Holy Spirit like worship session where we were just dancing, and it
Yeah.
wasn't this slow stuff. You know what I'm saying? It was just high praise, but like it was different because
Mhm.
we all had given permission to each other just to break the status quo. And I think that's
Yeah,
one of the greatest things what this ministry
Yeah.
has done is help give permission to
yeah.
to go beyond. And we just
Yeah.
it was so much fun. There would be times like Caitlin would bust out and doing Tahitian
Careful.
shaking of the hips, and then she would bust into her Latina side, and it's
Yeah,
just like, and I mean, I'd be jumping like a kangaroo, so it's all good. But
yeah.
but it was
No.
powerful.
Yeah, and even with that too, it's like to see how the joy in that specific memory was multiplied, like
Mm,
because the people that were driving the boat,
yeah.
they were that was their job, so they're like, "Oh, this random group of people, and
Mm,
here we are like dancing and
mm.
laughing and whatever." And we did not have a drop of
Yeah.
alcohol.
Right?
Like, it was just pure joy,
Yeah.
That's it.
and I remember at the end, like, the people who were driving the boat, like, operating the boat, like, they
Yeah,
thought we were drunk,
yeah.
but we got like, out of that, we got to share, like, "No, this is just, like, the joy that we carry,
Mhm.
and, so it was a really cool
Yeah.
experience.
So, Caitlin, you have transitioned, and it's because you have really a passion for inspiring women and
Yeah.
being involved in women's lives. Yeah, so, and I know that you really have a special message that you carry for women. And is there something you want to inspire women with today while you have the opportunity
Wow.
with us?
Yeah. I would say that one of the things out of so many things that I could say, but reflecting on my personal story, that there is no
Yeah,
story or no, yeah, personal story that can't be restored,
Mm.
that
That's
can't
good.
be redeemed,
yeah,
and like what you mentioned, I have a heart for women, and part of that is through doing midwifery and, seeing a woman give life, and I know even that there's so many women who've had
yeah,
even traumatizing experiences, birth or in
yeah,
life in general, and part of that is also my story, but
yeah,
I will say that, because I have personally experienced it, that there is no story, there is no
Mm.
past, there is no trauma or brokenness or hopelessness that cannot be restored and met with hope and life and
Mm.
really a new beginning.
Amen.
Because that is what I said, that's what I've experienced, and my life has never been the same.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't even have
Mm,
words to articulate, like, what that has meant for me and for my family.
Hmm.
So,
Luis, please, if
yeah,
I can I
yeah,
have to respond
yeah.
to something. She said,
Yes,
in
please,
the time that
please do.
I've known Caitlin, I think it's been now 6 years.
mm,
Um, she's always had a powerful testimony. She's always had a powerful story when she's shared, and I've seen her do it lots of times. And I remember, I'm not going to talk about, but like when there's a certain part of her testimony. It's when we were in Namibia when she shared that part for the
Mm,
first time, and it literally was like a night and day shift. The
mm,
authority that came, and I remember I was standing on the stage, and I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
what? And when she shared it, and then from then the confidence that just took off inside of her. And so
yeah,
I think there is such a
Yeah.
significance of
Yeah. Yeah.
what Caitlin has done and demonstrated, that when you are so 100% real with the
yeah,
story within you, shoot,
absolutely.
like, man, like, what can come against it? I
Yeah,
mean, the devil's a liar. We know that, but
yeah.
I just want to, Caitlin. I remember
Mm.
that so well
Mm,
that day, and I was rooting you on. I was
Yeah.
like so proud of you. I might have even
mhm.
dropped a tear or two. I mean, it's hot, and then maybe it's hot, so I was crying probably the heat.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
it was a
yeah.
good moment for a brother.
For sure. And to know,
Yeah.
like, also,
Yeah.
sorry, to also know
Yeah.
that, like, it's also a process,
Hmm.
like, and it's in the
Absolutely.
and there's so much
Yeah.
beauty in the process. And, the process can sometimes, like, not feel the best at times,
Mm,
like, it can be hard, but when you look back, you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like, I
yeah,
went through
worth
all of
it.
that?" Like,
Hmm.
and here I am today, like, so, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so I don't know, Caleb, if you have some final thoughts that you want to
Yeah,
share before I end off.
yeah. I would just want to say to those that are listening, I think someone like Caitlin, and kind of like my story, and with Luis, when we were
Yeah.
raised, we had a lot of reasons to be upset, and a
Mm,
lot of reasons to be upset with, for one, our parents, or for our cultures. Um, a part of me sometimes wishes I was taught
Yeah.
my mother tongue language more, and I'm sure Caitlin could say that at times.
mhm,
But we've also made a choice of,
Mm.
believing that, what, uh, choosing the good in it. And so I just want to say to those that would be listening,
Yeah.
honestly, like, Caitlin, her story is an example of someone that has chosen to persevere,
mm,
and it's that legacy from her
Yeah.
abuela who came, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
for sure.
It's being passed down. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm blessed by you, sis.
Yeah, Caitlin, I just want to honor you today for really being a brave woman, for really sharing your story to inspire
Hmm.
women. You've done it around the world, and it's really been great to see that. And like Caleb said, also to see the
So
growth in
good.
you as a person. Yeah, and I've always seen you as a person that has a gift of speaking and using life-giving words to call people out and really
Hmm.
call people out of darkness into light. And I just want to thank you today
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
sharing it also here with us. So
Hmm.
thank
Thank
you
you.
very
It's been
much,
an
Caitlin.
honor and a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening to our conversation with Caitlin. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button and let me know what was the biggest takeaway of our conversation. Hit the bell not to miss the next episode. And if you are inspired to discover your cultural gifts, then click on the My Time to Shine 15 minutes free course to get you going.